My name is Isabella, and I'm a 28-year-old working mother. My husband Richard is a company employee, 2 years my senior, and we're about to celebrate our first anniversary. We met at a party I was invited by a colleague. Amidst many assertive people, Richard stood out as calm and kind, and despite being older, he had this adorable quality. The way he talked was different from other men who seemed rather sleazy, which put me off. In contrast, Richard would say things like, "My family is really close," or "That embroidery on your dress is cute. My mom loves stuff like this." His conversations were heartwarming, and he was the easiest person to open up to. At that party, I only exchanged contact details with Richard, and soon after, we started seeing each other and naturally progressed to dating. Before marriage, Richard lived with his parents. I've been living alone since I went to college, away from my parents. Living at home, Richard didn't have to pay rent, so despite being around the same age, his disposable income was much higher than mine. Richard loves to travel with his family and friends. We traveled together sometimes, but I couldn't afford it as much, so it was only on rare occasions. After marrying, we started living together in an apartment. It was Richard's first time living away from his parents. He seemed excited and happy about our new life, so I didn't sense any problems until he said, "This weekend, I'm inviting Mom and Dad over. Actually, from now on, they'll come over every weekend." What? Richard began inviting his parents over every weekend. Their house was just a short drive away. Occasional visits would have been fine, but frequent visits were a bit much. I thought they visited just recently. I asked casually, trying not to upset him. "Yeah, isn't it great? Their family, after all." He didn't get the hint at all. Every weekend, I felt utterly helpless, dreading their visits. The issue with my in-laws coming over was the repetitive talk. "Richard is such a remarkable son. The pride of the family, ha 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 ha." Hearing the same conversation every time was one of the challenges. My in-laws often come over on Friday nights and stay until late on Sundays, spending all their time chatting in the living room. I can't just leave, so I end up having to be part of these interactions. Since they are guests, I'm the one who has to host. On my precious days off, I'm expected to cook lavish meals, clean the house, and even take care of their personal needs, leaving me exhausted. It would be nice if my husband and in-laws appreciated my efforts, but instead they complain about my cooking. "Isabella, your cooking is somehow lacking. The drinks don't go down well with this." "Richard, are you eating properly? You look thinner." "It's okay, Mom, Dad. I often eat out during the week." All three of them criticize my cooking. I had noticed before we got married that Richard's family tends to have heavily seasoned food. During our dating period, when I cooked for him, I was surprised to see him dousing steaks and scrambled eggs with loads of sauce. I started worrying if my cooking was too bland, but I realized it was just Richard's taste, as he did the same even in restaurants. Still, it's frustrating to hear from my in-laws. "Isabella, you need to cook properly. Didn't you taste it? Is this how it's supposed to be? A wife who can't cook is no good. You need to improve, or it might lead to divorce." It's irritating to be told that my food isn't delicious. Your seasoning is too strong, or maybe your taste buds are off. I can't just say, "I'll be more careful next time." All I can say is, so I started making the food saltier and providing extra sauces when they visit, which I don't normally do. I can't risk my husband developing high blood pressure. "Oh, today's meal is a bit better, I guess." It has improved a bit, just a bit. Their appraisal slightly improved. But when I tasted it, it was quite salty, and I thought to myself, what a family of tasteless eaters. Well, if they're satisfied with that, I suppose it's okay for now. However, things got even worse. One weekday, when I returned home tired from work, I found my mother-in-law, Emma, there. "I'm here to teach you how to cook." It was past 9 p.m. I have to get up early tomorrow, I thought, but my silent plea was ignored as Emma's cooking lesson began. Her cooking was, as I expected, laden with seasonings to an unhealthy extent. The soup was loaded with condiments, and the main dish was fatty meat with extremely heavy seasoning. "It whets your appetite, doesn't it?" Emma seemed delighted. Richard dug in like a boy, exclaiming, "This is it." The difference in our food values was terrifying, and I reluctantly tasted a bit of the meal. After that, Emma began visiting our home frequently. On weekends, my father-in-law, Joseph, would also stay over. It was almost like living together. It was exhausting. I reached my limit trying to accommodate my in-laws and desperately wanted at least 2 days off a week without seeing them. So I subtly suggested to my husband, "How about we go somewhere to relax?" He loves traveling, and I thought he would take it as a hint for a trip. As expected, he said, "Great idea, let's plan a trip." He began planning the trip. Since moving in together, we had been in an almost co-living situation with his parents, but this would be our first trip alone since our honeymoon. Richard hadn't been traveling with his friends either. I hoped he was saving for our future. The trip he planned was a weekend getaway for 2 nights and 3 days. The destination wasn't far, so we could relax without taking leave. "Thank you," I said, grateful to my husband for planning it. "Yeah, leave the trip planning to me," he said proudly. In hindsight, that was a mistake. On the day of the trip, while waiting for the bus to our destination, Richard was looking around restlessly. "What's wrong?" I asked, but I realized the reason before he could answer. "Oh, good, we made it in time." "Hey, Richard, sorry to keep you waiting." To my surprise, my in-laws had shown up. I looked at my husband apprehensively. "Come on, both of you, we're almost late for departure. That was close." "That was close? No, this is not what was planned. I want my enjoyment back." "What do you mean? When I mentioned the trip, Mom and Dad thought it would be more fun if we all went together," my husband said with a smile. I wish he had at least consulted me, or better yet, stopped discussing everything with his parents. He's already 30, for goodness sake. "Come on, let's get on the bus." "Isabella, don't just stand there daydreaming." "Okay." I wished for my 3-day holiday back. Throughout the trip, the enthusiasm of my husband and in-laws was overwhelming. "Let's have lunch at that restaurant." "Let's go to that place for drinks tonight." All the places I wanted to visit were ignored. Richard kept catering to his parents, paying no attention to my preferences. The worst part was, "Wow, what a great room, Richard." It was a 4-person room. I had been looking forward to staying in a suite, but it was a different room. Unable to sleep due to their snoring, it was an utterly exhausting trip. Back at work after the trip, I let out a big sigh, and my colleague next to me looked at me in surprise. "Hey, what's wrong? You've got serious dark circles." "Really?" I checked in a hand mirror and saw severe dark circles, not just blue but almost like red blemishes. I hadn't noticed them in my rush to leave the house. Lately, I've been so tired that I haven't spent much time on makeup. I was shocked. Then, My colleague whispered in my ear. "This is hard to say, but Isabella, your hair—" She pointed to a spot on my head. "What?" Afraid of what I might find, we went to the restroom together. Using the restroom mirror and my hand mirror, I checked the spot she pointed out and found a bald patch, the size of a coin. No way. I felt all my strength leave my body. A friend of mine had the same issue. "Are you stressed? Doesn't your husband notice?" My colleague helped arrange my hair to cover the bald spot, but I was truly shocked and didn't know what to do. Since it wasn't very busy that day, I left work early due to feeling unwell and stopped by the dermatologist before going home. I received medication, but it wasn't something that would heal quickly. The doctor said the cause wasn't clear-cut. However, I had already made up my mind. When my husband Richard came home, I brought up the subject. About the next trip we're planning. Richard seemed really excited about the last trip and was already planning the next one. He says it's just the two of us, but I'm sure his parents will end up coming again. So I tried a different approach. Can we take my parents along? If I said I didn't want to go, the trip would be cancelled, and his parents would probably end up staying at our house again. If I said I wanted to go out, his parents would join us. Yet, Richard hardly spends any time with my parents. He's only met them at the marriage introduction and the wedding. I thought this would be a good opportunity for him to understand how difficult it is to spend time with in-laws. But his next words left me speechless. "No, I don't want to. It's tiring and I need to be considerate." What? He makes me put up with his parents all the time and now he says it's tiring? I was completely infuriated. Later, my husband, I, and his parents, as expected, went on another trip. What place is this, I wonder? "Wasn't it expensive, Richard? Are you sure it's okay?" His parents seemed excited about the new destination, which was a bit further away than usual. "Well, this time Isabella planned it, so I'm not too sure," Richard replied to Joseph. "Yes, I planned this trip. The accommodations, the restaurants, everything was booked by me. Isabella, it's important to have fun, but don't spend too much, okay? Yeah, a wife needs to be frugal." Upon learning that I arranged everything, his parents started implying that I was careless with money. "It's okay, I got a good deal through an acquaintance." "Oh, I hope it's not too old or anything. And not a place with bland food. That would ruin the trip. I'm a bit worried about Isabella's choices." Ignoring their unhelpful comments, I led the way to our accommodation. It was getting dark, perfect timing for dinner. We planned to have our meal at the hotel. Upon arriving, Richard and his parents were astonished. "Is this really the place?" It was a splendid upscale hotel. "Yes, let's go in." I entered the lobby nonchalantly and completed the check-in. The room had a beautiful view of the sea, which would be even more apparent in the morning. I had arranged for the meals to be brought to our room. They were quite lavish courses. As the meal began, my in-laws were initially speechless. Once the hotel staff who had arranged and explained the dishes left, they started reacting in the complete opposite way. "Places like this look good, but that's about it. It's expensive, but the taste might be mediocre." They began eating, complaining all the while, seemingly unable to graciously accept that I had arranged a stay at such a nice hotel. Then the comments started. "Oh, this is bland. Is there any seasoning? See, it's all just for show. Maybe Isabella's arrangement wasn't such a good idea." All three, my in-laws and Richard, began complaining about the food. I found it delicious, but what could I do with three people whose taste was off? Sitting near the room's entrance, I discreetly summoned the hotel staff without them noticing. I let the staff listen to their gripes and demands for a while. This lack of taste in the food reminds me of Isabella's cooking. Did we come all this way just to eat Isabella's cooking? I was hoping for something delicious on this trip. They effortlessly mixed complaints about the hotel and me, freely voicing their opinions without any prompt from me. This hotel looks old. It must be cheap because it's big. Is this how our son's wife treats us? Choosing a cheap place for us to stay? Don't worry, Dad, Mom. Next time I'll handle the arrangements. They kept eating and complaining. Then, "Excuse me," a voice from outside the door said. Emma, thinking it was the next course being served, cheerfully replied, "Yes, but it wasn't about the food. I understand there have been some dissatisfaction with our hotel." The man who appeared wasn't carrying any dishes. It was a man not holding anything. "Oh," Richard uttered, freezing up. The man continued, "I also heard there were complaints about my daughter." "Yes, the man who appeared was my father." "Oh, Emma looked confused and turned to Joseph. "Well, what a coincidence to meet here! Ha ha ha!" Joseph laughed nervously, but my father's expression remained stern. "If there's anything you're unsatisfied with, we can remake it or change to a different menu. May I ask what it would be?" My father calmly questioned them. The three, having pretty much finished their meals, seemed unable to respond. "No, nothing in particular," Richard replied. "Is that so? Earlier, my daughter asked me to listen to your requests, as you are important guests. So I was waiting outside. I apologize if our hotel's cuisine, which is relatively lightly seasoned, did not meet your preferences." When the three realized that my father had heard everything, their expressions changed to shock. "It's a joke. The food was actually very delicious. Just kidding around, you know. Ha ha ha. Seeing Richard's forced laughter, my father said, "There's no need to strain yourself." Richard's face froze at this. I had called my father to discuss the stress caused by my in-laws, leading to my alopecia and the lack of support from Richard. It was the first time I consulted him about my husband. My mother passed away early, and I didn't want to worry my father too much. Hearing my story, my father was furious. "I'm coming over right now." He was determined to travel despite the distance from our house to his. I told him about Richard's travel plans and the likelihood of the in-laws joining, so we devised this plan together. My father is a retired manager of a prestigious hotel and still has influence there. As a child, I was often left at this hotel. Because of his late working hours and my kindergarten schedule, the hotel was my caretaker. I was doted on by the staff, helped with cleaning, learned cooking, and enjoyed delicious meals. So, my cooking skills are honed by this hotel, and I'm confident they are not as bad as my husband and in-laws complain. If this hotel doesn't suit you, please leave. If you are a burden to my daughter, I'll cut off ties," my father said sternly to Richard and my in-laws. "How can you say that? Tell a guest to leave?" My in-laws were furious, but another staff member came in and cleared their plates. They were stunned by this. "Please leave," my father urged them, and they reluctantly exited the hotel. "Is this a joke? We'll get our money back, right?" They complained, but the money won't be refunded, as I was the one who paid. Watching my in-laws leave, the hotel employees looked at them with disdain. They must have been really uncomfortable. The in-laws' complaints quickly ceased. For once, the usual 3-on-1 criticism against me was reversed, and I felt a sense of relief. After that incident, my husband, not wanting to face me, went back to his parents' house. I compiled all the mistreatment I had endured and consulted a lawyer. After getting an estimate for alimony, I sent the documents to my husband by mail. Startled, he hurried back home, pleading with a near tearful face, "Divorce and alimony? That's too harsh." But when I asked, "Do you have a solution then?" he stuttered, unable to answer. It was clear he would never prioritize me over his parents. "If you want to fight this thoroughly, I can call my lawyer," I warned. He quickly agreed to the divorce. My ex-husband returned to his parents' house, but it turned out he didn't have much money. I had thought his frequent travels before marriage meant he was well off, maybe saving money by living at home, but he was just a spendthrift. Living at home, he managed even if he spent his whole salary. After marriage, when we started sharing rent, his inability to afford travels became apparent. Now, with the alimony on top, travel seems out of reach for a while. Neither my ex-husband nor his parents are likely to travel anytime soon. The hotel my father chased them from is a very famous one, well known for its cuisine, and often featured in the media, which my ex-in-laws were unaware of. The inn of my ex-daughter-in-law's father is terrible. The food is awful. And so on, they kept saying at family gatherings, apparently embarrassing themselves. "Isn't that the wonderful hotel? Oh, your family, right? Tasteless, aren't they? How's your blood pressure? Better be careful," they were told. I heard this from a close relative. Though I divorced in my 20s, my alopecia has healed, and I'm living happily and healthily. I cook and eat what I like, feeling much better physically. This year taught me that forcing myself to adapt is harmful. While it's natural not to share all values, I've learned to avoid marrying someone imposing and overbearing again.
My mother-in-law casually broke the news to my stunned self. "We're going to be living together now. We just remodeled it into a duplex for convenience. The property is in your name, right, Emma? Sorry to bother you, but could you please cover the $80,000 remodeling bill?" My mother-in-law and husband laughed triumphantly. Witnessing this, I, filled with resolve, was about to confront them with the truth that even my husband didn't know, along with the evidence. I am Emma Davis, 26 years old. I live a bit away from the downtown, in a nature-rich area, and work an office job while drawing illustrations as a hobby. Lately, I enjoy uploading my drawings on social media and reading the comments on them daily. I have a husband who is 3 years older than me, and we're enjoying our married life in a favorite old farmhouse that we bought right after our wedding. But there has been a visitor to this house once a month since we got married, who always gives me a headache. "Emma! Emma! I'm here! Please open up quickly!" Hearing the persistent banging on the sliding front door, I rushed to it. "Ah, mother-in-law, I'll open it right away," even though there's a perfectly good doorbell right next to the door. I try to make a smile and open the sliding door. "There are so many bugs around here. It's so annoying. Is George still at work? Poor thing, even on Saturday. Oh, I brought some of his favorite food." I see a woman holding a large bag, looking tired from waiting beyond the door. While dealing with her rapid-fire chatter, I paced on a fake smile. The once-a-month visitor is my husband's mother, that is, my mother-in-law. My husband being an only child, she insists on taking care of him even after our marriage, and to my gratitude, she even instructs me on house chores. The last time she came to our house, she rearranged all the food in the fridge, and I had to start the next day's breakfast preparation from hunting down the ingredients. I recall my husband repeatedly telling me before we got married, "If my parents ever need care, we'll live together, I want you to understand that. I'm disappointed to think I might have to give up this beloved old house when the time comes, but I've come to accept it. What bothers me more is the thought of living with this mother-in-law 24/7. Sorry for my husband. It fills me with a bit of gloom. Fast forward 2 years into our farmhouse married life. I heard my husband that my father-in-law had slipped on the stairs at home and broke his leg. They will need our help from now on. Let's live together, just as we discussed before our marriage. Yes, I'm worried too, so I think it's a good idea. Can I continue my drawing hobby? I was worried about my father-in-law's health, so I agreed without hesitation to move in together. However, I was anxious that being caught up in housework and taking care of my in-laws might rob me of the time for my hobby of drawing. Whether he was aware of my anxiety or not, my husband just said, "I want you to prioritize the house," and left the room, headed to his office. Being left alone in my room, I felt like I had half given up on my selfish husband. While looking back at the illustrations I had drawn up until now, one by one, I began to sort out my feelings. Just as I had made up my mind to live with them, an unexpected event occurred. While I was working as usual at my workplace, I suddenly felt numbness in my hands and feet and was instantly overwhelmed by intense dizziness and collapsed. Thanks to a colleague who immediately called an ambulance, my life was not in danger, but it turned out to be a stroke at a young age after medical examination. Although I had been pointed out high blood pressure in health checks before, I regretted neglecting it without going to the hospital. Including detailed examination, surgery, and rehabilitation, the hospitalization period turned out to be about 2 months. From the discovery of the disease to the hospitalization progressed at a brisk pace, and she realizes that her husband has given her very little concern. After being diagnosed with a stroke at a young age, I took out my phone with trembling hands and called my husband right away. The only thing I could hear from the phone was a disappointing voice saying, "I see, so the living together will be postponed, huh?" I couldn't respond to the fact that he was worried about the future life at my in-laws' house, not about my body. Since my father-in-law is still in the hospital with a fracture, there was no need to worry about caregiving, which was a blessing in disguise that I could focus on treatment. Also, since we don't have children, there's no need to worry about that. Suddenly, the face of my mother-in-law, who always says, "I want to see my grandchild's face soon," every time we meet, pops up, and as if to shake it off, I picked up the sketchbook nearby. Recently, I've been too busy preparing to live with my in-laws and going through examinations since I collapsed to have time for my favorite illustrations. Once I start living with my in-laws, I'll probably lose even more time to draw. I decided to think of this hospitalization period as the last free time that God has given me, and decided to fully enjoy my hobby. When this period is over, I decided in my heart to do my best for my husband and in-laws, whether it's housework or anything else. The 2-month hospital stay ended in a flash, and finally, the day of discharge. My husband casually asked if he should come to pick me up, but I wanted to spend some time alone until I got home, so I declined, feeling a bit guilty. While I was in the bus, I saw the familiar landscape outside the window and realized that I was already near home. The sunlight hitting the beautiful green leaves was dazzlingly sparkling, making me feel indescribable as I thought, this is goodbye to this rich, natural place. Since my in-laws' house is located relatively close to the city center, my life will change drastically from now on. Feeling a little lonely, I slowly got off the bus at the familiar bus stop. As I was heading towards my soon-to-be farewell home, I suddenly stopped in my tracks at the sight that appeared before me. There was supposed to be my favorite old private house here, but instead, there was a house I had never seen before. Since I had been in the hospital for about 2 months, I checked the position of the surrounding buildings and the way I came, wondering if I had mistaken the location. But it was not a mistake after all. There's no use wandering around, so I timidly pressed the intercom of the house. Then a familiar voice said, "Yes." The voice was undoubtedly my husband. Still feeling confused, I quietly answered, "It's Michelle," to the intercom. The front door creaked open, and my husband in his casual attire came out. "Aha, welcome home. You came home earlier than I expected. I had the day off today. I could have picked you up." "George, what happened to our house? Why has it changed so much?" I interrupted my husband, who seemed relaxed, maybe just woke up, his hair mist, to ask my question with a sense of disbelief. However, disregarding my anxiousness, George only responded with a vague, "Huh? What's up? What happened?" without intending to answer my question. Just then, I heard laughter coming from inside the house. Thinking it couldn't be, I pushed past my husband and headed toward the living room. When I opened the unfamiliar door leading to the living room, I saw my mother-in-law lying on the couch watching TV. She was clutching her stomach and laughing while watching the TV screen. "Why is my mother-in-law in this house?" "Oh, Michelle, welcome back. Hospital stays can be long, but don't worry. I took care of the house while you were gone." I wonder what this house stuff my mother-in-law is talking about. Could it be chores? Or, with an overwhelming bad feeling, I pressed my mother-in-law on why the old house had changed so much. Without showing any sign of guilt, she blurted out, "Well, we're all going to live together, right? So I just remodeled it into a duplex to make it more comfortable." The phrase, "just remodeled it into a duplex," kept replaying in my mind. My mother-in-law was always the type to interfere with our life, but I never expected her to remodel our house without permission. Moreover, weren't we supposed to start living together in my in-laws' house, which is closer to the city center? Every time my mother-in-law visited the old house here, she used to complain about the bugs and the short walk from the station. Despite that, why? "A lot of things have changed. Oh, and there's something else important I have to tell you." Turning off the TV she had been watching, my mother-in-law whispered to me with a grin, "The remodeling cost a bit. I believe the title to this house is under your name, Michelle. I'm sorry, but could you handle the payment?" Chuckles, not a hint of apology in them, my mother-in-law said, "It's $80,000. And her smile deepened. "Remodeling cost? The title to this house? $80,000? The unexpected words felt like a punch to the head, and I felt my legs are shaking. I can't even find the words to reply. While I was staring at her, mother-in-law, who was stunned and laughing fearlessly, my husband, who was at the entrance, opened the living room door and sneaked in. The moment I saw him, my feet naturally headed towards him, holding a faint hope that he would surely be on my side. I relayed to my husband exactly what my mother-in-law had said, clinging to a desperate hope for his reaction. But all I received from him was a cold response. "Well, that's about right. Take care of it, will you?" That's right. That's the kind of man he is. When I collapsed from a stroke, he was more concerned about our living arrangements than my health. He's a man who will stop if his mother says green means stop, and will go if she says red means go. A man who always thinks his mother is right. The discomfort and dissatisfaction I'd felt toward my husband escalate once it flooded. I was done. I thought from the bottom of my heart, I would throw this family. "I understand now, George. I am going to divorce you. And mother-in-law? No, Cecilia. Please handle the renovation costs on your own." After declaring this all at once, I turned my back on them and moved to leave the room as quickly as possible. But it seemed they weren't going to let me go so easily. "I've been losing interest in you anyway, so it's no big deal. But remember, this house is in your name, Emma, so you have a responsibility to pay." "That's right. Feel free to leave, but please settle your dues first." I was astonished at the two of them who selfishly made their claims. I cannot help but let out a sigh. Surely, if I turned around, I'd see their smug faces grinning in victory. I refused to look back, standing tall as I replied, "You keep saying the house is in my name, George, but did you forget? The ownership has been transferred to you." I revealed the truth. However, they only laughed at me and believed I was lying, just to avoid paying. That's when I brought up how George had asked me to change the property's ownership when we got married, as he didn't want the house to be in his wife's name for appearance's sake. Since I didn't particularly care about the property title, I had immediately transferred it to his name. Upon hearing this, the laughter of the two who had been so complacent until now abruptly stopped, and I could feel the panic gradually setting in. I don't recall saying such a thing. There's no proof anyway. Anticipating this response, I turned back to face them, walked past them, and opened a drawer of a shelf from our old house. Let's see. It should be somewhere around... here it is. This is the proof. I took out a document from the drawer where the property and the house ownership were listed and showed it in front of their faces. When I carefully pointed to the part that said the ownership was in George's name, my husband's face turned pale. That's fraud. I never thought you'd actually do it, and I definitely can't pay such a huge sum of $80,000. I was disgusted with my husband, who started yelling as soon as he realized the payment obligation was on him. Since a decent conversation seems impossible, let's communicate through lawyers from now on. Cecilia, your son seems to be in quite a pickle, so please take good care of him from now on. Beside my loud husband, I smiled at my mother-in-law, who was standing dazedly, and finally turned my back on them, leaving their home for good. After that, my husband called several times, but I chose to ignore him entirely, decide to communicate formally through a lawyer. Given our already strained relationship and problems with my mother-in-law, the divorce was settled without any issues. In addition, regarding the matter that my husband insistently shouted when he left, change of name is a fraud, was decided that there was an agreement between us because it was changed when they got married 2 years ago. My lawyer assured me with a smile that this is neither fraud nor anything illegal. With that, all the uncertainty inside me was completely dispelled. It seemed that the cost of renovating that house was supposed to be paid in full by me as soon as I got discharged from the hospital. Wanting to applaud, I now appreciate the well-crafted, spiteful act of pushing me into hell just after I had endured surgery and rehabilitation and finally got discharged due to illness. In the end, since the house was in my husband's name, it was his duty to make the lump sum payment, and he ended up strangling himself. In addition, I was able to secure alimony after the successful divorce. My husband, who had been hit with a claim for a total amount that he could not possibly pay off, had either borrowed money from dangerous places or hadn't. While I was fighting with my husband and mother-in-law, I received an apology from my father-in-law, Bob, who had been hospitalized with a broken leg, saying, "I'm sorry for my wife and son's behavior." Of course, it didn't seem that Bob was involved in this matter. However, there's no denying that for 2 years after our marriage, he had ignored his wife and my cold husband. After replying briefly to Bob's message, I decided to cut all ties with that family and start a new life. Since then, my health has gradually improved, and I was able to return to work. When I was married, I used to draw illustrations while being mindful of my husband's gaze, but now I can immerse myself in it as much as I want, whenever I want. Originally, I was just drawing as a hobby, but now I get job offers from the social networking site where I post my illustrations, and I now spend more time drawing for work than for pleasure. Now I'm heading to see an old farmhouse in a somewhat rural town. My current dream is to buy this old farmhouse with the alimony from my husband and my savings, and to open an art studio. Today, I'm about to take the first step towards this dream. On the bus, as I gazed out at the scenery, I found myself recalling that day. The day I left the hospital changed my life forever. The abundant natural scenery outside is the same as that day, but my feelings are clear, and I'm excited about the new life that's about to begin. The leaves on the trees, illuminated by the sunlight, look so bright that they dazzled.
As a doctor's wife, you ought to dress properly. That's what my sister-in-law said to me, looking down on me. I guess to her I'm a lesser being. My name is Emily, and I work as a nurse in a general hospital. I met my husband, Ethan, at this very hospital 5 years ago. He was a medical intern back then, and as we cared for each other amidst our busy schedules, we grew close and eventually started dating. Although we often couldn't find time to see each other due to work, after 5 years of dating, he proposed to me this year. Ethan comes from a family of doctors. I wonder if they'll accept me. Today, we're visiting his parents to formally announce our engagement, and I can't help but feel anxious and a bit weak. Hey, have confidence in yourself. After all, I chose you. If anything happens, I'll be there for you. Ethan reassured me, and I felt a bit relieved. Ethan's father runs his own practice, and his brother is the successor. His mother and sister-in-law are homemakers. Even Ethan's aunt and uncles are doctors, making it a typical family of medical professionals. On the other hand, I lost my father at a young age and was brought up in a single-mother household. Wanting to become independent as soon as possible to help my mother, I decided to become a nurse. I studied at a public university thanks to a scholarship. I'm grateful to my mother who raised me, but I'm worried about the inevitable comparisons that'll be made. Having heard about how strict his parents were, I was incredibly nervous by the time we arrived at Ethan's house. To add to that, not only his parents, but also his brother and his wife and other relatives were there, as Ethan had announced he was bringing his fiancée. After introducing myself to each one, I bowed deeply. "So, Emily, what do you do for a living?" asked my mother-in-law, noticing my anxiety. "I work as a nurse. I met Ethan when he was a medical intern." As I spoke, Amy, the wife of Ethan's brother, interjected. "A nurse? Are you aiming for a more privileged marriage?" she asked, with a hint of mockery, which caused me to shake my head frantically in denial. "No way, that's not it at all." As I tried to explain myself, Ethan's uncle muttered, "There are nurses who aim for medical interns." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "What about your family? What does your father do?" Amy asked, and my voice faltered. "My father passed away when I was young." Seeing Amy's knowing look, I felt lost for words. "So you were raised by a single mother? I've heard of women who marry doctors for money," she said with an exasperated sigh. Ethan, sensing my distress, raised his voice in frustration. "Amy, isn't it rude to say such things at our first meeting? Emily is a hard-working person. She didn't want to burden her mother, so she put herself through public university. I've never seen a nurse as dedicated as her." His words made me blush. Amy apologized with a smile, but her eyes didn't hold any warmth. "I'm not ashamed of being raised in a single-parent household, and I certainly didn't marry Ethan for his money. But feeling unable to stand up for myself, I was on the verge of tears. Then Ethan's quiet father spoke. "It's impressive that you made it to a public university. Our sons weren't the sharpest tools in the shed. Well, we basically bought their way in with money." He said it with a straight face, but it was clear that this was his father-in-law's idea of a joke. Ethan and his brother-in-law had always been top performers since their school days. "You know, neither my brother nor I have fully grown up yet." With this exchange between the father-in-law and Ethan, the tense atmosphere loosened. Speaking of not growing up, Amy, Ethan's sister-in-law, seemed to be stuck in her parents' shadow. The brother-in-law shot a quick glance at Amy and made a sharp comment. Amy apparently graduated from a prestigious all-girls school. It's a school where, even without much academic achievement, one could enroll if they had enough money. She came from a wealthy family, and her marriage to the brother-in-law was arranged, it seems. His comment must have rubbed her the wrong way. Amy glared at the brother-in-law. "Don't be rude. By lineage, I outrank you. Don't compare me with a child from a single-mother household." She then turned her harsh stare towards me. I had heard from Ethan that the brother-in-law and Amy didn't have the best relationship. Amy's high and mighty attitude apparently irked the brother-in-law. What's more, for some reason, Amy had suspicions about her husband's fidelity and would throw fits. She suspected that one of the administrative staff at the clinic might be his mistress and kept blaming the brother-in-law. The clinic where the father-in-law is the director isn't that big. There are only about 3 administrative staff. Though all 3 of them are young and attractive, Ethan insists that his brother wouldn't be foolish enough to get involved with an employee. Apparently, she misinterpreted some business emails between him and the staff. I never expected to witness a marital spat upon first meeting them. While I was feeling flustered, my mother-in-law stepped in to help. "Stop it. Arguing like this is unsightly." Chastened by their mother-in-law, the brother-in-law and Amy quieted down. Turning to me, the mother-in-law spoke softly. "There will be times when you face harsh words from those around you. Emily, are you prepared to marry into a family of doctors?" Faced with her question, I nodded firmly. There had been plenty of times when I was envied by senior nurses after starting to date Ethan. Ethan also experienced teasing from his colleagues about dating a nurse. Despite it all, we didn't lose heart, and our bond deepened. All I can think about is marrying Emily. I hope you can all watch over us. No one objected, and they congratulated our upcoming marriage. Considering how strict his parents are, I expected them to object. But contrary to my expectations, both the father-in-law and the mother-in-law kindly accepted us. The only one who seemed unsatisfied was Amy, which concerned me. With a successful completion of our marriage introduction, we got registered. Our relationship didn't change just because we got married. The one thing that changed was the frequent invitations from Amy. "Let's go shopping tomorrow. I'll teach you how to dress appropriately as a doctor's wife." Amy often used the phrase, "doctor's wife." I was initially surprised at her invitation to go shopping, especially after her condescending attitude at our first meeting. But observing her, it seemed like she wanted to assert her dominance over me. She would buy and flaunt clothes that were beyond my pay grade. Even today, as we went to the boutique, Amy was buying loads of branded clothes. Seeing the amount, I couldn't help but marvel at how much her husband was earning. "I've told you before, why don't you quit nursing? Supporting a busy doctor husband is the wife's duty, isn't it?" While having tea after shopping, Amy chimed in. Here we go again, I thought. She keeps telling me every time we meet that I should become a homemaker. I consider nutrition. I've never used prepackaged meals. My floors don't have a speck of dust. Are you doing your part as a doctor's wife? Sure, sometimes we rely on ready-made curry pouches and the dust accumulates. It's made me doubt myself, and I've talked about it with Ethan. I asked if I should quit nursing and become a homemaker. Ethan, with a serious face, reassured me. I want you to continue nursing. I fell in love with you for your vibrant work attitude. He had told me before that he was smitten at first sight, seeing me treat patients with kindness. Remembering Ethan's words, I replied, I have no intention of quitting nursing. Ethan understands that too. At that, Amy snickered. Really? I'm sure a low-bred woman like you will be cheated on soon enough. You're only good for your brains after all. Amy suddenly started to look down on me. I won't stand her belittling my household. I lost my temper and gave her a piece of my mind. So your only claim to fame is that you come from a rich family, right? You don't even get along with your husband. Maybe you should worry less about being cheated on and try trusting him more. As soon as I'd said it, I knew it was too late. Amy's face turned beet red with anger, and she looked like a fiery demon. How dare you? A woman like you doesn't belong in this house. With that, Amy stormed off. When I told Ethan what happened, he burst out laughing. You told off my annoying sister, good. She'll cool down after a while. I had regretted what I'd done, but now I felt better. In fact, I was even a little relieved that the invitations to go shopping and tea had ceased. You know, Amy always acts so high and mighty in every boutique. Is she a regular customer or something? Ethan shrugged it off, saying she just loved shopping, but it was on my mind. Hello, I've got something I want to ask. I dialed up a friend. I thought the next time I would see Amy would be months away, at New Year's, but mother-in-law contacted me the next day about a dinner party. Father-in-law was turning 60, and she invited us to celebrate with a high-end sushi meal. The thought of seeing Amy was unpleasant, but I wanted to celebrate father-in-law's birthday. I figured she must have forgotten by now, and I was looking forward to dinner. When I arrived at the restaurant, I saw brother-in-law and his wife approaching. As soon as Amy spotted me, she marched right over, her face stern. "Why are you here? Didn't I say you don't belong in this house?" Brother-in-law and Ethan hastily tried to calm the aggressively confronting Amy. "You better remember what you said. How dare a poor, low-bred woman like you talk back?" Amy's anger continued to escalate. "People like you, raised in a single-mother household, are considered lower class. I absolutely refuse to dine with someone of your status. Get out." Brother-in-law looked exasperated as Amy caused a scene right in front of the restaurant. Then a cold voice echoed through the commotion. "Then go home, you," came a frosty voice. It was mother-in-law. She must not have expected mother-in-law was watching. "Huh?" Amy murmured softly, glancing over her shoulder. "I'm terribly embarrassed by this spectacle outside the store." Mother-in-law's words were met with nods from everyone present. "I only argued back because Emily was being rude. I support my husband so much." Amy seemed to go into hysterics, her voice rising again. "It's Ethan's fault for bringing such a low-status woman into the family in the first place. Divorce her, even now." Her words were utter nonsense. Naturally, Ethan wore a bewildered expression. "Please, don't get more hysterical than this." "It's your fault. You insult my education." The fight between brother-in-law and Amy had officially started. Mother-in-law intervened once more. "I had planned to ask about this later, but if you're going to make such a fuss, I'll ask now. Amy, you're hiding something, aren't you?" At mother-in-law's words, the arguing voices instantly went silent. "Hiding something? What do you mean?" Amy's voice trembled slightly, though she was trying to stay calm. "Emily told me about your shopaholic tendencies." Amy's face turned ashen. "You always talk about a certain department store. One of my friends works there." She had been puzzled about Amy's ability to buy so many brand-name clothes. At first, she thought brother-in-law was very open-minded. But would he really let his wife, with whom he didn't get along, freely make such high-priced purchases? Something seemed off. She thought that maybe Amy was receiving an allowance from her wealthy parents. But Amy had proudly claimed that since marrying brother-in-law, she had never asked her parents for money. According to Ethan, brother-in-law was indifferent to money and let Amy handle his salary and savings. Perhaps that's why Amy had free rein to spend. According to mother-in-law's friend, Amy was a frequent shopper at the store and would sometimes spend hundreds of thousands in a day. But her attitude was so arrogant that the staff found her annoying. "Also, Amy, aren't you cashing in on a family credit card?" This was just a guess, there was no proof. But it seemed to hit the mark as Amy turned even paler. "How did you—" She had figured Amy, with her lavish spending habits, was also borrowing money. "You don't even understand the value of money, yet you flaunt your power around town. Don't you feel ashamed as a doctor's wife?" Amy was rendered speechless by mother-in-law pointing out her shopaholic tendencies. "The staff has also complained about your haughty attitude." Even father-in-law, who had been silently listening, couldn't bear it any longer. Amy would wait until father-in-law wasn't around, then visit the clinic to complain about poor cleanliness and scold the staff. The way she treated the 3 office clerks she suspected of having an affair with her husband was appalling. She even demanded that they quit if they had the audacity to flirt with him. Upon learning the real situation, her father-in-law feared that the staff would quit if things continued this way. When my brother-in-law discovered that she had been squandering money, he was livid. How much did you borrow? Tell me everything." Amy just stood silent, not even bothering to apologize. Seeing this, her husband's patience snapped. "You high and mighty woman, I want a divorce. Pay back all the money you've spent." Amy, who didn't expect a divorce, desperately pleaded that she didn't want to split up. But nobody, not her in-laws, nor her husband, nor Ethan, was willing to listen to her. Then she turned to me with a plea in her voice. "Emily, as a fellow wife, you understand how I feel, right?" I couldn't help but laugh at her audacity. "Are you asking for help from a woman you've always looked down on because of her social status? Why don't you ask your wealthy parents for help?" After I bluntly told her off, Amy's head dropped in defeat. And so Amy and her husband decided to get a divorce. Even when she handed in her divorce application, Amy was still causing a fuss. Eventually, her parents came to take her back home. The money she'd spent over time amounted to millions, and Amy, unable to pay it back, went crying to her parents. They paid off her debts, but she's now the talk of the town as the woman who spent her husband's money. It's going to be hard for her to remarry. Her parents are so embarrassed that they're keeping her indoors for now. They've confiscated her cash and credit cards, too. Amy, who used to relieve stress through shopping, is now locked up in her room, I heard. I never really understood why she tried to assert dominance over me, despite coming from a wealthy family. Her brother-in-law once told me that Amy had an inferiority complex about her education. She was irritated when I, a clever woman with a degree from a public university, was praised by relatives for marrying Ethan. Seeing Amy, I understood that being rich doesn't necessarily mean being happy. Then I had a question for my mother-in-law. "Why did you allow me to marry into your family? I thought marrying into a doctor's family required a good family background." Upon my hesitant question, my mother-in-law answered with a smile. "Actually, I also married your father-in-law, a medical intern back then, when I was a nurse, before our children were born." She said she had faced a lot of opposition to her marriage from her family because she was a nurse. She didn't want her sons to experience the same hardships, so she arranged a marriage for her eldest son with a girl from a good family. However, her eldest son, who married Amy, didn't seem happy at all. He looked more like he was tired of married life. That's why she wanted her second son to be with the person he loved and was willing to approve it from the beginning. It was a surprise when my second son brought home a nurse. It seems blood doesn't lie, huh? My mother-in-law and I shared a chuckle. From then on, I worked as a nurse in my father-in-law's clinic. I guess he hired me because he liked the strength I showed by not letting Amy's nasty comments get to me. My salary is higher than before, and working close to my beloved family makes me feel really blessed.
What's this whole mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict people talk about? I've never felt it personally. Are there really such mean mothers-in-law out there? I get along great with Ethan's mom. Whenever I visit, we cook together and have a blast. If anything happens, I know Ethan will have my back. Ethan just proposed to me. My name's Zoe. I'm a 26-year-old office worker. I met Ethan in a college club, and we've been together for 8 years. Maybe that's why I get along so well with his mom. Back in college, we both aimed to join a major corporation. Ethan was so determined to join that famous company, and I took the chance too. Job hunting was tough, but we both made it in. We hugged and celebrated. But since then, our busy jobs meant we couldn't have many relaxed dates. We just wanted to support each other more than anything. That's when Ethan proposed. After 8 years, we felt inseparable. I was over the moon. We visited each other's families, and all that was left was the wedding. Then, one day, Ethan's mom, who was supposed to live with his brother Liam, asked to move in with us. I was taken aback. "We never discussed living together. What about my parents?" I said. Ethan tried talking to her, but she wouldn't listen. She had her reasons. After your father passed, I couldn't do much for Liam. He didn't go to college, and without a high school diploma, he can't get a job. Ethan, you're all I have. You might as well be my eldest. What? Liam's there with you. We can help financially. I want to live with both Ethan and Zoe. Families support each other. I love you, Zoe. Mother-in-law, but... After discussing, we agreed to live with her until Liam got married. After the wedding, we moved in. But what awaited was the classic mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict. I was sure we'd be fine. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. to find her already making breakfast. I rushed to the kitchen. Good morning. I'm sorry I'm late. Let me help. You sleep in so late. I've already made breakfast and Ethan's sandwich. Women should wake up early and handle the house. What kind of upbringing did you have? Her words stung. I was shocked. What should I do? I was surprised from the first day. I was in a state of panic, not knowing what to do. What should I do in times like this? My mind went blank, and I said, Mother-in-law, I'm sorry, what should I do? You need instructions for everything? And you work at such a big company? Maybe you got in by luck and were about to be fired. That's why you rushed to marry Ethan. That's not true. We wanted kids, and I wanted to make things easier for you. Easier? I woke up early because there's one more person, and you're still sleeping. It's more work. I'm sorry. I don't like you. Don't defy me. Got it? What? Defy me, and you'll get a divorce. That's it. I faced the classic conflict I never expected. Every day was filled with her taunts and sarcasm. The dream life I had envisioned vanished before my eyes. I was exhausted, constantly trying to keep Ethan's mom in good spirits. We'd only been married for 3 months. I wanted to talk to Ethan about it, but he was always too tired from work and fell asleep immediately. I thought I'd have a chance when he got home. One day, as Ethan was changing in the bedroom, I brought up the mother-in-law issue. But Ethan dismissed it. Come on, Zoe, you're probably just misunderstanding. There's no way my mom would act like that with you. Anyways, I'm starving. Let's eat. I shouldn't have been surprised. In front of Ethan, mother-in-law was always the perfect mother. But behind closed doors, she was a nightmare. She'd constantly threaten, defy me and you'll get a divorce. Where did our feelings fit into all this? I grew distant from Ethan, feeling more and more isolated. One day, at my wit's end, I finally snapped back at her. You keep saying defy me, and you'll get a divorce. Fine, let's do it. What? Wait! A few days later, we divorced. Mother-in-law was shocked. She had always seen me as a servant, someone who'd do anything for her. Clean, do the laundry, make the bed, wax the floors, and when you're done, go shopping and prepare lunch. I want a roast beef sandwich today. After that, give me a 2-hour massage. Got it? Defy me and you'll get a divorce. I regretted not continuing my job. Still, I couldn't let go of my feelings for Ethan. I believed that I could build a happy family with Ethan. One day, as I was packing to leave, Mother-in-law entered the room, looking anxious. What are you doing, Zoe? I'm leaving. I'll have movers pick up the rest later. This is a joke, right? It's no joke. You said if I defied you, we'd divorce. So, let's do it. You're being so childish. It's obviously a joke. A joke? Stop messing around. I've had enough. Let's divorce. It's ridiculous that your mother even has a say in this. Well, I mean, it's just that I'm not your mother's servant, you know. I never treated you like that. You're just misunderstanding, Zoe. Every single day you let this happen and you call it a misunderstanding? Is this the kind of family your mother wanted? Wait, it's just, I've struggled raising our 2 sons. When Ethan got married, I thought I'd let out all the pent-up feelings. I felt this way for a long time. You wouldn't understand since you don't have kids. What are you talking about? Struggled? Your father left you a house and a good amount of money. Ethan was 16 then and didn't need much care. That's why I said you wouldn't understand. Have kids and then talk. Really? But taking out your frustrations on your daughter-in-law is wrong. Was I chosen just to be your stress reliever? Is that why you were nice to me? Of course, it's always been this way. A daughter-in-law shouldn't defy her mother-in-law. That's tradition. I quickly packed and left the house. She still insisted that what she did was right and told me to understand her struggles. If this is what family means, if being treated this way is what family is about, then I don't need such a family. I'm content with my own life. I calmed down at a nearby park and then went to my parents' house. The moment I saw my mom, I burst into tears. She felt so warm. Zoe, what happened? Just wait a moment. She quickly made me a warm coffee. Drink this and calm down. This isn't like you. After calming down a bit, I told her everything. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't want to worry you. You always care about me. Silly girl, I'm always here for you. Just relax here. Maybe it's best to divorce. Life has its ups and downs. I cried like a child. She hugged me tightly. I wished I could be a mother like her. The more I thought about it, the sadder I felt about Ethan not supporting me. Even if we had a good relationship with his mother, he never listened to my concerns. The happy times before marriage felt like a lie after 8 years. I realized the complexity of the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law relationship. Ethan, oblivious to everything, came home as usual. He called me after confronting his mother, but I refused to answer. He kept calling, but I blocked him. I just wanted a break. Ethan kept calling me over and over again. I couldn't help but block his number. I just needed a break. That night, I enjoyed the creamy stew I made with Mom and went to bed early. When I woke up the next day, I was surprised it was already past 8 a.m. Rushing to the kitchen, Mom greeted me. "Did you sleep well?" I slept like a log. It's been a while since I had such a good sleep. Zoe, how about we go to a pottery class today? A pottery class? Today? It's a new place nearby. They let you join even for just one session. I've been wanting to make a vase. Thought it might be a good distraction. I decided to spend the day out with Mom. The pottery class was more engaging and fun than I expected. For that moment, I completely forgot about yesterday. Later, Mom and I had a late lunch and did some shopping. Helping with dinner, I realized it had been a while since we spent quality time together. During college and my early working days, I never really cooked with Mom. She looked genuinely happy, probably trying to cheer me up. A few days later, a letter arrived for me. Ethan's name was on the back. I opened it immediately. To my shock, it was divorce papers. I couldn't understand why Ethan would do this, but part of me felt relieved. I felt bad for not answering his calls, but sending divorce papers was a bit much. With no lingering feelings, I decided to fill them out and submit them to City Hall. Is this how breakups go? I started to think Ethan was just like my mother-in-law. What happened to those happy 8 years? As these thoughts consumed me, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Ethan. I hesitated but opened it, and there, the email painted a picture of Ethan, completely under mother-in-law's control. She had manipulated him, blaming everything on me. I was shaking. Could this really be happening? Had mother-in-law cried to Ethan? My head was spinning. Ethan's message. I always believed in us. It hurts to be betrayed like this. Left me conflicted. It was clear mother-in-law was behind this, but my feelings remained unchanged. The realization of mother-in-law's true nature was terrifying. Regardless, I decided to submit the divorce papers the next day. The next morning, I went to the city hall and had the papers processed. Surprisingly, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Feeling motivated, I decided to start job hunting. A few days later, I got a call from a former boss. There was an opening in a subsidiary company, and they were struggling to find the right person. The offer was tempting, so I expressed my interest. Then, my phone rang. It was Ethan. Answering, I could hear a frantic Ethan. "Zoe, you haven't submitted the divorce papers, right? Let's forget all about it." "What?" "I'm sorry, I didn't know everything. Liam told me everything. It was all Mom's doing. Liam knew about her true nature, but couldn't intervene because he feared she'd kick him out. He's really sorry." "So what do you want?" "I want to apologize. I'm truly sorry." "It's too late. Please don't contact me anymore. It's over." "What?" "Let's get back together. It was all Mom's fault. I was a victim too." "Victim? You never listened to me." "But I thought Mom was telling the truth. She's always been kind, so I thought you were mistaken." "Do you realize how much I suffered? How hard it was? Mother-in-law kept piling chores on me. You never listened. This is the result." "That's not true. I was deceived by Mom. Let's start over. I've rented a place near your house." "I'm not interested, and the divorce papers have been processed. It's over." "What? I shouldn't have sent those papers. It was all Mom's idea." "You always blame Mom. Liam seems to understand better. He's not just playing games at home, he's working." "What? I thought he was just playing games." "That's another lie from mother-in-law. You two are perfect for each other. Goodbye." "Wait, let's try again. Zoe! Zoe!" I hung up, feeling a sense of closure, as I realized that it was already over, and so I started a new chapter in my life. "Zoe, it's your first day at work. Here's a sandwich." "Thanks, Mom. I'm running late. I'll make my own tomorrow." "Take care." "Will do. Bye." I felt refreshed. A few months later, I was promoted to manager. Work was fun, and my colleagues were great. I looked forward to the future. Maybe I'll take a break from dating. I'll take things slow.
Hey, what's going on? This is not what we discussed. Quiet down. I don't want to drop out at my son's wedding. Well then, I won't come. This is an unthinkable incident that occurred at my brother-in-law's wedding. My name is Caroline. I'm a 30-year-old working housewife. I married my husband Steven 5 years ago. We're thinking it would be nice to have children at some point, but for now, we've decided to concentrate on our careers. I was raised in a single-mother household. My father passed away due to an illness when I was in elementary school. It turned out to be cancer. To pay for the high medical expenses, my mother worked tirelessly, and unfortunately, it took a toll on her health. Even after that, she kept working to raise me, but by the time I was in middle school, she could hardly work. Her health had seriously deteriorated, and she could only imagine to work part-time a few days a week. But my mother, who had lost her husband and had no other relatives, had no choice but to work to raise me. I wanted to go to high school, but the desire to help my mother was stronger, so I decided to work after graduating from middle school. However, when my homeroom teacher found out about this during a career guidance session, he naturally opposed my decision. "Caroline, it's going to be tough for you to start working right after middle school. The future options will be limited. At least, you should consider high school." "But I want to start working as soon as possible to ease the burden on my mom." "Caroline, there are scholarships available now, and you can go to night school or take correspondence courses while working during the day. There are many options, so think it over. I'll return this career guidance form to you, so please write at least 2 other career options besides getting a job, and hand it in within the week. I reluctantly took the form returned by my homeroom teacher and decided to research on the internet using my mother's cell phone when I got home. When I started typing in the search window, I saw search stories that my mother had probably looked up. High school scholarships, financial assistance for non-taxable households, high school welfare benefits. I was curious, so I decided to search for them. Then I found out that there are indeed scholarships and various other systems available, just as the teacher had said. And for households on welfare, it seems that money needed for school supplies and tuition fees are also provided. I might be able to go to high school without burdening my mom. I was not entirely uninterested in further studies to begin with, so I began to hope a little. I decided to compare each system and opened the search history. And below the pages I had searched, there was something incredible. There were histories of question and answer sites and city websites my mother had searched for. Search history showed signs of keyword searches for welfare application, conditions to receive welfare, what to do when denied welfare, and not allowed to apply for welfare. These search histories seemed like cries from my mother's heart to me. Perhaps my mother had researched for my sake, learned about welfare, but was turned down at the counter and couldn't receive an application. Seeing this, I just couldn't think or research about going to high school anymore. And then the weekend came. When my homeroom teacher asked me, "Have you thought about your career path?" I replied that I simply couldn't consider going to high school. As expected, my teacher looked dissatisfied. Though no further guidance came during that moment, my mother received a call from the school in the evening. After hearing the situation from my teacher, she confronted me. "Why are you thinking about getting a job? If it's about money, I'll figure something out. Please, just go to high school." I responded, "But Mom, you know you've been denied welfare, right? I know going to high school costs more than a scholarship can cover." "How did you know?" "I saw it when I borrowed your cell phone. Since Dad passed away, it's been just you and me. What am I supposed to do if something happens to you? Please don't push yourself anymore. I'll work once I graduate to make up for all the hard work I've put in." Tears streamed down my mother's cheeks at my words. The person who was probably the most worried about my education and our finances was my mother herself. Sobbing, she hugged me and kept repeating, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Thus, due to my strong will, I decided to work right after graduating from middle school instead of proceeding to high school. However, finding a job as a middle school graduate was very difficult, as most job postings required at least a high school or an associate's degree. Even if the job didn't require a certain level of education, an ordinary middle school graduate with no qualifications would likely be rejected during the paper screening process. Eventually, I ended up working part-time until 6 p.m. after graduating from middle school. One day, I was called in for a meeting by my boss, who proposed that I work as a full-time employee once I reached the age equivalent to a high school graduate. According to my boss, my diligent work ethic despite my young age had been noticed. There were some conditions to meet, but I gladly accepted the offer. Afterwards, I fulfilled the conditions set by my boss and was promoted to a full-time position in April of the year I turned 19. Despite many hardships, my life was sailing smoothly. It was around this time that I met my current husband, who I was introduced to as a business partner. We got closer through work meetings and began to discuss personal matters. He also lost his father in a traffic accident and was raised by a single mother, similar to my situation. We clicked instantly over our shared experiences, which eventually led to a relationship and marriage. When we went to meet his mother, she initially welcomed me, but turned hostile when she learned that I was a middle school graduate. "I can't believe you didn't even go to high school. We may be a single mother family, but I managed to send Stephen and his brother Robert to high school and college. Even if it required scholarships, it was possible to attend high school. What was your mother doing?" "Mom, that's no way to talk. Our circumstances were due to an accident, and we also had compensation from the other party. Caroline's family has its own issues. It's not fair to compare like that." If you do your research and follow the proper procedures, there are many grants and supports available. No offense, but it makes me think either she had poor grades that prevented her from going to high school, or both mother and daughter are simply ignorant. Either way, she's no good as your wife. I can't approve of a marriage with such a woman. The harsh words I received had left me deeply frustrated. My brother-in-law, Robert, had mocked me incessantly for only having a middle school education, making acceptance by my husband's family seemingly impossible. Eventually, we defied their approval and got married, sort of eloping, and had a private ceremony. Given the circumstances surrounding our marriage, my husband and I found ourselves largely estranged from his family. Nothing improved over time. Our relationship was merely superficial, limited to basic greetings. Then, one day, we received a phone call from his family. "Hello, Stephen. Robert is getting married. They are planning a wedding ceremony, and we were wondering if you and Caroline could attend." Just like that? Out of the blue? What a turn of events. After treating Caroline so coldly all this time, you guys sure are feeling generous now, aren't you? I do apologize for that, but Robert's bride-to-be insists she wants blessings from all the family members. Please, for the sake of your mother. Stephen and I discussed it at length and decided that if this could be a chance to mend relations, we would attend the wedding as his mother wished. On the day of the ceremony, my husband was asked to come earlier than planned to help out, so we ended up going separately. Although they told me it was okay to arrive just in time for the start, I decided to go a bit earlier so I could greet my in-laws. However, when I arrived at Hotel A as instructed on the invitation, there was no sign of a wedding taking place, and there was no one else around just for a wedding. So I decided to ask the hotel staff, "Excuse me, I have this invitation for a wedding here?" The staff member gave me a puzzled look and said, "Could you please wait a moment?" and went to the back, leaving me to wait for a while. After waiting for a bit, the staff returned with a response I could not have anticipated. "I'm sorry, but there are no weddings scheduled at our hotel today." "What? But it clearly states this hotel's name, right here." I double-checked the invitation with the staff, but the hotel's name printed there was undoubtedly correct. Just then, my phone rang. It was Stephen. "Caroline, where are you?" "I'm at the desk of Hotel A. Stephen, where are you? They are telling me there's no wedding here today." "Why are you there? Didn't you get the call from my mom this morning? The schedule and venue have changed." "What? I didn't receive any such call from your mom." "No way." "Hold on, I'll get there as soon as possible. Where is it and when does it start?" "It's at the chapel in Hotel B. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes, but I don't think you can make it in time from there." The location Stephen gave me was on the opposite side from Hotel A, past our home. The turn of events led me to believe this was his mother's doing. "Stephen, can you hand the phone to your mom?" I decided to confront her directly over the phone. "Hello, Caroline. Why are you calling at a time like this? We're quite busy." "Don't play dumb. What's going on? I just got a call from Stephen and the story doesn't match up. The time and location of the ceremony are totally different from what we were told. And you lied about contacting me. What are you trying to do?" "You're such a nuisance. Even if you're not the brightest, try to read the room a little. Your presence would spoil a special occasion like this, and it's embarrassing to have a dropout, so don't come." "Fine." Suppressing my frustration, I reached out to a certain person. Meanwhile, in the groom's waiting room at the wedding venue, Stephen was having a heated argument with his mother and brother. "Mom, how can you say that to Caroline? And Robert, why was the content of the invitation sent to our house different from the others? Were you deceiving us from the start?" "Huh? What are you talking about? As long as you're here, everything will look fine. And it won't be a problem even if the dropout isn't here, right? Don't you dare! Stop belittling my wife any further. Stephen, Robert, both of you, stop it. This is right before the important ceremony." "Who do you think caused this massive bride harassment at this important ceremony?" At that moment, there was a knock on the waiting room door. Outside the door were Robert's bride-to-be and her parents. "I heard that you declined Caroline's attendance. Robert, can you explain why this has happened?" There's a reason for this. It's embarrassing, but my brother's wife only has a middle school education, so she's not the kind of person who should be here." "That's right. My eldest son's wife, Caroline, is a dropout. But my son went against my wishes and married her. She and her mother lack common sense and are a disgrace to our family. It's too embarrassing to invite such a daughter-in-law here. At the words of Robert and his mother, the bride covered her mouth with her hand, and her parents exchanged glances with clouded expressions. Robert, even if it's true, there are things that are acceptable and things that are not acceptable in society. The bride's father said so, showing the screen of his smartphone. What? How did you get a hold of that? What the bride's father showed to everyone present was the image of the invitation sent from the in-laws to us. Actually, the bride's father is my former boss. Although he is no longer my direct boss due to a transfer, he was the one who did everything he could to help me get promoted, and I owe him a lot. Also, the bride had once worked part-time at my workplace, so I was acquainted with her. It seems that you and your son have a misunderstanding. My daughter and I know Caroline very well, and she's not the person you describe. She was a child who struggled with her family environment, but she's always been a dutiful daughter who loves her mother. She never forgets to be considerate to those below her, and she took good care of my daughter when she was working part-time for work experience. What? But... As Robert stammered, this time the bride spoke. What my father says is true. When I was in high school, I used to work part-time at his office. Being young and naive, I wasn't well liked by my coworkers. But Caroline always stood up for me. She also helped me when I was being bothered by a difficult customer, and she always took the time to explain things that I didn't understand at work. My father and I are truly grateful to Caroline, and to think that someone would treat our benefactor in such a way. At the bride's words, her mother-in-law was shaking with anxiety. She began to shout, obviously at the end of her patience. Well, education is important, isn't it? I made sure my sons were well educated so I wouldn't be ashamed to introduce them anywhere. Even made sure they graduated from college. And in this day and age, to only have a middle school education? Unless there's a very good reason, it's expected to at least graduate from high school. If they can't do that, it's simply a lack of effort on the part of both the individual and the parents. There was indeed a very good reason, at least for Caroline and her parents. And she, having joined the workforce right after middle school, worked hard. Didn't you hear from Caroline herself? She acquired her high school equivalency diploma as part of the requirements for her promotion. Actually, I took a high school equivalency exam as a requirement to be promoted to a full-time position. The exam covered the content equivalent to 3 years of middle school and 1 year of high school. As I had been away from academic studies, I had forgotten even some of the things I had learned. I studied between work and after returning home, sometimes getting help from others, and somehow managed to prepare in time for the exam. The content was mostly basic, and I passed with flying colors. A high school equivalency exam is a national examination, and passing it means the government recognizes you as having the same level of academic abilities as a high school graduate. Can you please stop referring to Caroline as a dropout from now on? It's unpleasant. And I can't possibly allow my precious daughter to marry into such a horrible, abusive family. It's fortunate that the wedding reception and the registration of the marriage haven't happened yet. We'd like to pretend this wedding never existed. Meanwhile, at the wedding venue, unaware of the drama unfolding behind the scenes, the guests were anxiously waiting for the reception to start. However, as time passed with no sign of the ceremony beginning, the venue staff began to hurry about. An uneasy atmosphere began to spread, and the guests started to feel suspicious. Then, a solemn voice came over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Unfortunately, the wedding scheduled for today has been cancelled due to unavoidable circumstances. The bride's father has a message for you. I'm the bride's father, as introduced. Despite your efforts to adjust the schedule for today's occasion, I deeply apologize for the sudden turn of events, and I am sorry to inform you that due to the discovery of malicious harassment from the groom's side, the marriage has been called off. I take full responsibility for not noticing this until now. The reception has been cancelled, and we will proceed with a simple dinner. All the wedding gifts will be returned, so please be assured. I am terribly sorry for the inconvenience. After finishing his speech, he bowed deeply. How dare you! I was looking forward to this day so much! The discontented mother-in-law stormed the venue, causing a commotion, but was restrained by the staff and dragged off to a side room. The guests left at the reception venue found themselves in an awkward predicament. Some, in a spirit of might as well, carried on with their meals, while others, made uncomfortable or feeling unwell by the incident, decided to leave. Stephen, being a member of the family, went around apologizing to the guests and thanking the bride's father before heading home early. This debacle was caused by Stephen's family and resulted in a broken engagement. As a result, Robert and the rest of his family decided to cover all the costs, including the reception fee, the transportation costs for the guests, and an additional compensation for the bride's side. Due to this incident, my mother-in-law started receiving judgmental looks from relatives. Robert, who had invited his colleagues to the wedding, also found his standing at work had deteriorated. When we got home, my husband apologized to me repeatedly. "Caroline, I'm really sorry about my family's behavior," he said. "It's okay. It's not your fault, Stephen. I want to make things right. I've decided to cut all ties with my family over this incident. I'm utterly disgusted. We live quite close to my mom's house, so how about we move closer to your mom and start over in a new place? If it's okay with you. We could live with your mom." "Really? Thank you, Stephen." I agreed to Stephen's proposal, and we started to live with my mother. Our interactions with the bride's family have resumed, surprisingly in a pleasant way, all thanks to that chaotic reception. Life is unpredictable, isn't it? Marriage can be tough when you're stuck with weird in-laws. Christiana, the mother-in-law, looks worn out as she seeks sympathy from relatives. And she never gets better at cooking. Have you ever met an adult who can't learn? Layla, the sister-in-law, jumps in, adding fuel to the fire. Enough is enough. Armed with undeniable evidence, I step in front of the family. My name is Natasha, and I'm 29 years old. I got married 2 years ago and work part-time. My husband Justin has a full-time job. We met through friends and got married after dating for 2 years. We live in a house that was rebuilt on my in-laws' property. That was one of the conditions for our marriage. I initially opposed it because I wanted us to build our own home, but I've learned something since getting married. Justin never stands up to Christiana or Layla. He treats Christiana like she's a goddess, which was a shock to me. He tries to make sense of even her most nonsensical statements. Even when I suggested that living on the same property might be uncomfortable, Christiana shot it down. My opinions are secondary now, though we considered a two-family home. It would be cheaper to build and would save on utilities. But Christiana's selfishness exploded again. She insisted on living alone, complaining about hearing other people's noises, so we ended up building a small, separate house for her. I still don't understand why she was so against it. If anyone should be unhappy, it's me. She even refuses to install a shower in her place and comes over to ours every day. She insists on being the first to shower, claiming it affects her health otherwise. Every day, I come home to find Christiana has let herself in and is lounging around after her shower. She even goes through our fridge like it's her own. She complains. "At least keep some beer chilled for me after my shower. You're so inconsiderate." So now, we end up having dinner together every day. It's like we're living together, except she has her own big room. But that's not the only issue. As mentioned before, Justin has a sister. She's quite a character, and very different. Layla is still unmarried, and with her personality, marriage seems unlikely. She doesn't even seem like she could get a boyfriend. Layla is incredibly wasteful. She lives in an apartment 5 minutes away, but only works part-time. She says, "I'll quit my job when I get married, so why work full-time?" But I think the real reason is her obsession with a minor, unsuccessful idol. If you don't work part-time, you won't be able to take free time off. Even though it's a service industry, it's impossible for a full-time employee to take a day off every weekend. For Layla, these events are her top priority. She brags about being recognized at every event. She buys multiple $10 photos, and her room is filled with them. And that's not all. To keep up with her idol events, Layla always shops for secondhand designer goods at consignment stores. So she's always decked out in worn-out, outdated brands. Yet her pride is sky high, and she constantly looks down on me. I'm not into flashy fashion or secondhand items. Still, she snidely comments, "With your plain face, wearing those clothes, you'll just blend into the background." She's got a talent for backhanded compliments. Ever since I got married, Layla has been asking for stuff every time she sees me. Not just clothes and bags, she even takes photos against our home's walls to post on social media. She's a total show-off. She even asked to borrow my engagement ring for an idol event. I firmly refused. I can't risk losing it. What Layla and Christiana have in common is their high pride. Despite not having much income, they have expensive taste. They insist on organic vegetables and only eat meat from well-known brands. They even say we have to go to a poultry farm to buy eggs. Because these two eat dinner at our place almost every day, I've started to hate dinner time. They claim they're here to make sure Justin doesn't eat anything weird. Despite their health-conscious talk, both are surprisingly overweight. They must have a lot of snacks at home, and they take out their daily stress on me. Their demands make no sense. For example, they say, "Wash the curtains once a week! Dust and allergies will make us sick if you don't vacuum every day." I think twice a year is enough for the curtains. I've never seen anyone wash curtains weekly. We're two adults with dual income. Our house stays clean without daily vacuuming. They just want to complain about something. And yet their own homes are filled with clutter. There's no way someone with a dust allergy could live in such a place. You might wonder why I married into this family. Simply put, Justin deceived me. He told me grand lies. First, he said saving money was his hobby. We never splurged on dates, so I believed him. I'm not used to luxury, so his frugal lifestyle felt comfortable. I thought we'd save money to invest in our hobbies. When I shared this with Justin, he seemed very sympathetic. But after marriage, I found out his financial situation was entirely different. He's not the same person I dated. He also lied about enjoying his job. He tries to find excuses to skip work. His company probably knows. And his entire family just wants to work me to the bone. Here's the strange part. Justin told me to quit my full-time job when we got married. He said one condition of our marriage was for me to become a housewife. I was too excited at the time and lost my sense of judgment. I never liked my job, and I had always admired housewives. I saw posts from housewife friends who always kept their homes clean. I wanted to support my family in a sparkling clean home like hers. But once I started married life, everything was different from what I'd heard. First, when we were in the process of rebuilding the house, it turned out Justin had loans, so we couldn't get a mortgage. Even the home builder was surprised. We were told that if we had land, the loan would most likely be approved. About not having any other loans, Justin had lied. But we were already married, and I was determined to build the house, so I lent Justin the money. Before marriage, I never thought I'd be responsible for the debt Justin accumulated while he was single. The silver lining was that I liked to save money and had a decent amount saved up. That's how I could cover Justin's debt. Otherwise, I couldn't bear it. My savings were almost entirely depleted when we got married, and the day I could become a housewife never came. I had to look for part-time work right away. Fortunately, I found part-time work quickly, as long as I wasn't picky about the hours. Even with a day's income, it's tough to get by on Justin's salary alone. Plus, we want kids someday, and we need emergency funds. So I took all the part-time work I could get. But the people in our house are not cooperative at all. They treat me like a servant. They insist that housework is my sole responsibility. They don't even wash their own dishes. Christiana says part-time work doesn't count as a real job. It's insulting. I want to tell her to try working herself. But if I talk back, even a little, she says, "If you can leave, then leave." There's a limit to what I can earn from part-time work. I regret quitting my job. Christiana tells me, "You can't live without Justin's income. Women should be more submissive." I don't want to be told to be quiet by the world's most nagging woman, Christiana. I was troubled by the daily harassment from my in-laws. Then something unexpected happened. Layla had a mental breakdown. Apparently, she was deceived by someone she met on a dating app, spent all her money, and was ultimately abandoned. She said she bought him everything he wanted. She spent all her money, even her living expenses, and rent. At that moment, I inwardly laughed at Layla. Was it an illusion that she and Christiana looked down on me so arrogantly? But my laughter lasted only a short while. The impact somehow came back to me. Layla had always been living off part-time jobs. She earned enough for her living expenses, but she had zero savings. Well, she's working part-time, so what can you do? If she can't work because of her mental state, she can't pay rent. Not my problem. She should focus on reality instead of chasing handsome men. She's an adult, she needs to solve her own problems. Given this financial situation, a family meeting was held. Seeing Layla's grim face, I realized how scary illness can be. Christiana and Justin brought lots of Layla's favorite foods, trying to cheer her up. Layla is overweight, so she'd probably be fine without food for a few days. Then Christiana said something shocking to me. Healthy people should work. Natasha, you should send Layla 1.5K a month. I was speechless. Why should I send Layla, who brought this on herself, 1.5K every month? I couldn't wrap my head around Christiana's unexpected suggestion. 1.5K is too much, even for sending money to a college student. It's ridiculous. Then even Justin chimed in. Yeah, let's do that for now. If she doesn't have to worry about money, she'll get better quickly. Right now, let's just focus on her getting better. By the way, most of that 1.5K would go to pay off the debt she'd been accumulating on her credit card. Knowing that, I'm even less inclined to pay or lend her money. Whether she's genuinely sick or just acting, Layla is exuding an aura of unhappiness. If I send her 1.5K, it would eat up most of my part-time earnings. I refused, but the whole family blamed me. Even Justin said, "If something happens to my sister, can you take responsibility?" As if it's my fault she's unwell. Honestly, even if I refused, there's no more money coming from my in-laws. In the end, I had to send the money. Christiana and Layla still don't help with any housework. I wake up at 3 a.m. every day to finish all the housework before going to my part-time job. I send Layla 1K and even pay an additional $500 for her rent. Why should I pay her rent? Well, if she loses her place, she'll end up at our house, which is the last thing I want. Everyone in this house, including Justin, sees me as nothing more than a convenient source of money. 3 months later, Christiana announced that she's inviting all the relatives for a small home party. She said 40 people would be coming. There's no way our house can accommodate that many people. Christiana says, just connect the guest room and the living room. But I don't want to let 40 strangers into my house. In this day and age, social distancing is necessary. I managed to book a nearby restaurant, but I had to handle the reservation, the food, and the payment. Christiana, who's been nothing but trouble, didn't even say thank you. She told me, "You're finally becoming useful. You should thank me, your nurturing parent." At this point, I don't even feel like talking anymore. Relatives often say things like, "You've had a tough day, haven't you?" Or, "Thank you for everything." But Christiana and a now healthy Layla say things like, "Don't praise her too much. She's always such a useless wife. She'll get carried away." It really ticks me off. Then Layla looks at me and says, this is delicious. I'm so glad it's not Natasha's cooking. It's been a while since I've genuinely enjoyed a meal. She's always so careless." "Absolutely, she's always a mess," they say, laughing crudely between themselves. Then to the still single folks, they add, "You really suffer when you marry a weirdo. You should be more discerning." My mother-in-law tries to gain sympathy from the relatives with her tired expression. "She never improves her cooking. I've never seen an adult with such a lack of learning ability." Layla chimes in, saying whatever she pleases. I decided it was time to execute my plan. If you dislike me this much, it's becoming difficult to stay in this family. When I say that, all the relatives look shocked. They're surprised because I've never talked back before. Justin tries to hush me in a panic, but I won't be silenced anymore. I thought this was a good opportunity to expose Christiana and Layla's true nature. I say, "Christiana, Layla, I apologize for being an incompetent wife." They look satisfied. "Good, you understand. Now be quiet. Don't meddle in other people's affairs." Other people. At that moment, all my doubts disappeared. I've reached my limit. I can't send money to Layla or pay the rent anymore. The room buzzes with chatter from the relatives. Everyone is confused. I explain to everyone. I'm glad Layla is feeling better. I was worried when she got scammed on that dating app. Christiana desperately tries to silence me, but it's too late. The relatives won't let it go. They all want to hear the details. I tell them how Layla got scammed and became depressed, how I was sending her money, and how I was the only one doing housework because my family wouldn't lift a finger. The relatives are all extremely angry. First off, it seems like no one even knew Layla had a part-time job. She had everyone believing she worked at a big corporation, so you can imagine the shock. Why aren't you working then? Why are you so broke? Questions started pouring in from all the relatives. Seems like she couldn't lie anymore, so she started to spill the beans. When she tried to say she wasn't working due to health reasons, I had to correct her. Come on, stop lying. You're just living life around your failed idol career. Layla glares at me. Justin steps in. Enough! She's finally getting her spirits up. But I know she's been fine for a while. I know she's been attending idol events every day last month. It's infuriating to see her take photos with random guys for $10 each, all on my dime. I exposed everything, from her reckless spending to her debts and the mysterious money transfers. Then Layla starts fake crying, claims I've been bullying her and Christiana. I couldn't believe the audacity, but I had prepared for moments like this by gathering plenty of evidence. When I played the audio of Christiana and Layla bullying me, the whole family was in an uproar. I then announced my decision to divorce. I also told them that I had already packed my bags and was ready to leave the house. My husband was both shocked and angry. He probably didn't like being called out in front of everyone. The relatives were furious with my in-laws, saying, "This is totally different from what we've been told." Their support boosted my confidence. Although my husband was angry, the relatives backed my decision to divorce, and it was finalized without a hitch. We're not a wealthy family, so I couldn't expect any alimony or property division. However, with the help of my relatives, I was able to arrange for the money I had lent and sent over the years to be paid back in installments. I had thought that money was gone for good, so it felt like a win. I got him to sign the divorce papers in front of everyone and immediately filed them. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. My mood instantly brightened. No more mysterious money transfers or rent payments. I now have a lot more financial freedom. I'm happy that I can finally buy stylish clothes that I haven't been able to afford for a long time. Divorcing was definitely the right move. After that, my in-laws fell apart almost immediately. Well, of course, they couldn't possibly sustain their lifestyle without my income. My part-time earnings were much higher than my husband, so it was inevitable. He was often skipping work and had switched to being paid daily. He had been lying to me and spending his days gambling. There's no way a household of 3 spendthrifts could ever work out. 4 months after the divorce, I happened to pass by my old house and saw a for sale sign. I couldn't help but smile, thinking, serves them right. Since that family gathering, some relatives have been concerned about me and kept in touch. They often update me on what's happening with my former family. From what I've heard, they can't make ends meet and have moved into an old apartment. It's one of those rare places where the toilet and bath are shared. Proud as they are, Layla and Christiana seem humiliated and even more withdrawn. With no money for outings and 3 arrogant people crammed into a small space, it's no wonder they're at each other's throats. Being alone has made me feel free, and I've started to enjoy my work. People around me have noticed that I've become happier, and I think the divorce was a good decision. In fact, I was offered a full-time position from my part-time job, and now I'm financially stable. I'm amazed at how everything has been moving in a positive direction since the divorce. I now have some financial breathing room and am enjoying investing in myself. From now on, I plan to take better care of myself and grab hold of happiness.
I got rid of all of your stuff because you decided to go home without telling me. When I returned from caring for my mother, back home, these shocking words were thrown at me by my husband. A quick look around the house confirmed that none of my personal belongings were anywhere in sight. Why would you do such a thing? You left me here all alone to go back home. It's your fault for not listening to me. With that, my husband flung the newspaper he was reading at me. I let out a heavy sigh at his childish behavior. My name is Lucy. I am due to retire at the age of 65 this year. but have accepted an offer to continue working till I'm 70. My husband Joshua and I were introduced by mutual friends. We married 2 years ago. Both of us had been previously divorced and we didn't have any children together. Living as a couple in our late 50s turned out to be more exciting than we'd anticipated, despite our busy work lives. However, ever since my husband retired a year ago and started staying at home, his attitude towards me has slowly changed. From the start of our marriage, he has been somewhat dominant at home. Constant complaints and snide remarks about my housekeeping have worn me down emotionally. As we were newlyweds, I was concerned about our lives in old age. Divorce wasn't an option back then, no matter how tough things got. Well, dinner? I haven't seen someone in such a long time, I'm definitely going. I received a call on my cell phone from a friend from college inviting me for a meal after not seeing each other for several years. We were all so busy that we hardly had the chance to get together, so I immediately accepted the invitation. We agreed to have lunch together the following Sunday. I was looking forward to meeting my old friends and worked hard to make it that day. To make sure I arrived on time for our meeting, I left the house. While my husband, who usually sleeps until noon since his retirement, was still asleep, I left a handwritten note before heading out. Sorry to keep you waiting, you're all early. I planned to arrive 15 minutes early, but my friends were already there. We just got too excited and arrived too early. Today, 2 of my high school friends, who also attended the same college with me, were joining. We've been the best of friends. As our chatter was blooming, it was time for our reservation, so we headed to the restaurant. It was a casual and welcoming place. Since I was always busy with work, I rarely had the opportunity to visit places like this, which made me very happy. I haven't been to a place like this since my youth. You're exaggerating. Let's come here as many times as you want after you retire. But you extended for 5 more years, right? People who can work are different. We don't have to wait until I retire. We're going to have lots of fun from now on. Various dishes were served, and we savored them. We reminisced about our student days and discussed our thoughts at our current age, having a wonderful time. It's been a long time since I laughed this much. I haven't had a restful moment at work or at home for a while. As I thought about this, a hurried sound of door opening and a panicked voice from the restaurant staff caught my attention. Wait, isn't that man Lucy's husband? You're right. He's coming this way. What? No way. Hearing my friend's words and looking towards the commotion, I found my husband with a devilish look on his face heading towards us. I instinctively looked away, but the next moment all the dishes on the table were knocked to the floor by my husband. The sound of the plate shattering echoed throughout. In the middle of the uproar in the restaurant, the first to speak was my husband. Why did you go out without preparing my meal? What? What are you talking about? You always manage to eat without me making anything. I'm talking about today, and you're wasting money in a place like this. It's my money I earned, and I'm free to spend it how I want, right? Shut up. You don't talk back to me. You'll lose your income when you retire at 70. I'm telling you to save it. My husband's absurd argument made me raise my voice, but realizing this was a public place, I recoiled and made myself small. Not only my friends, but also the other customers and staff were taken aback and were staring at us. Feeling embarrassed and angry, my face turned red. Then one of my friends stood up. Why are you here all of a sudden? We're just friends gathering for a meal. As a husband, I think you should understand that much. That's right. Just because you're married doesn't mean you have the right to control her, they said, glaring at him. Relieved at my friend's support, I looked at my husband, and it was evident that he was trembling with rage. Apparently, he was so angry that he did something unthinkable. He took water from the next table and splashed it at my 2 friends. Ah! Hey, what are you doing? I stood rigid, aghast at what had just happened, merely watching my drenched friends. It's because of people like you who take her out that her housework gets neglected. With that, my husband yanked my hand and dragged me out of the restaurant. All the while, the restaurant was buzzing with commotion, and I could not bring myself to raise my voice. Days later, I called my friends to apologize. I'm truly sorry.
It's not your fault, Lucy. It's clearly your husband who's in the wrong. To be frank, you should leave him. You'll be constrained in everything you do from now on.
My friend said this with an awkward look, but I also thought that I needed to rethink my relationship with my husband after this incident. Joshua has changed, but I can't bring myself to cut ties. Even though I knew in my head that I needed to leave, I was already emotionally attached to my husband after just a few years together. But, as if to mock my feelings, my husband took an outrageous action again. Given the recent incident, I figured I wouldn't be able to go out without telling my husband anymore, so I decided to go shopping with him. Do you have any plans today, dear? I'm retired now, so of course I don't. Are you making fun of me? No, that's not it. I was thinking of going shopping. Would you like to come with me? I guess I have no choice. We headed to the shopping center, where we could find anything we needed. Even while driving, my husband looked sullen and seemed to be in a bad mood. We're here. We're here. What did you come to buy? I came to buy my mom's pajamas and such today. The ones she's wearing now have gotten old. When I answered this way, my husband let out a heavy sigh. Why do I have to shop for your mother? He ended up not even getting out of the car. I had no choice but to shop alone. When I quickly returned to the parking lot, not only the car, but also my husband was gone. Thinking it was strange, I called my husband multiple times, but he didn't answer. Could it be he went home first? I searched around for a while, but I couldn't find my husband in the end. Since I didn't have money for a taxi fare, I ended up walking home. It was a 1-hour walk carrying bags. Being nearly 60 years old and lacking in regular exercise, I had to take several breaks and eventually arrived home in 2 hours. When I got home, my husband was laughing heartily while watching TV and drinking beer. When he noticed my return, he looked at the exhausted me and laughed again as if mocking me. How many hours did it take you to get back? That's because you left me there. Why would you go home all of a sudden? Your shopping isn't my concern. Now hurry up and make dinner. He said, then he leaned back on the sofa and turned his attention back to the television. I'm not done talking. Even when I shouted at him, he ignored me. Being repeatedly subjected to my husband's selfishness, my frustration reached a boiling point. At this time, when I was feeling mentally drained, I received a call from my mother's home care nurse informing me that my mother had fractured a bone. My 87-year-old mother had been living alone since my father passed away, and usually as a helper to assist with daily life. Apparently, she had accidentally tripped over the entrance's step, and I was told she would need constant care for a while. You see, my mom fractured a bone and needs care. I'm going. Hey, wait, what about my dinner? And besides, she should be fine on her own with just a fracture. What are you saying? My mother is elderly. If we leave her as she is, she won't be able to walk or eat on her own. As I argued back against my husband's selfish remarks and prepared to go to my parents' home, he said something unbelievable. If we leave her alone, won't someone from the other side come to pick her up? Then we wouldn't have to deal with her anymore, right? He smirked as if enjoying my reaction. You're despicable. Ignoring him, I stormed out of the house. I could hear unbearable insults being thrown at me from behind, but they no longer reached my ears. I had been holding back, but after hearing him talk about my mother in such a way, something inside me exploded. At that moment, I decided to take revenge. For a week, I stayed at my parents' home to take care of my mother. As expected, my phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from my husband, but I ignored them all. While concentrating on my mother's care, I couldn't help worrying about my future life. I could continue working until I'm 70 so I can work for another 5 years. However, I was prepared to quit my job for my mother. Knowing that just thinking won't help, I decided to return home once to discuss the future with my husband. When I arrived home, the front door was unlocked and my husband was sitting on the living room sofa with his arms crossed. I'm back. I hesitantly called out to him, and the words that came out of his mouth were unbelievable. I threw away all your belongings because you went to your parents' house without permission. What? In a panic, I looked around the house. Indeed, all my personal belongings had vanished. My clothes from my wardrobe, my cosmetics from the bathroom, everything. The album with precious memories of my mother seemed to have been discarded as well. Why would you do such a thing? Where did you throw them? Give them back. What's with the attitude? If you can't listen to me, then get out. What? Whether it was because I was being defiant, he was irritated and hit the table. Seriously, you incorrigible man. I wonder if my mom had seen through your character. Having lost the energy to even get angry, I sighed heavily and looked down at my seated husband. Our marriage certificate. Huh? What are you talking about? Our marriage certificate. My husband, who hadn't expected to hear that, widened his eyes in surprise. We didn't submit it, right? Us? In fact, my mother was strongly opposed to my marriage to him. Looking back, I wondered if she had sensed something about my husband back then. She adamantly refused to permit our marriage. There were also circumstances at work where it were more convenient for me to keep my maiden name, so we had discussed waiting until each of us retired to submit the marriage certificate. We were in common law marriage. So we're not legally husband and wife? That's right. We even had separate insurance cards. And I had been left to handle all official documents. You must have completely forgotten about the existence of the marriage certificate, so you threw it away, didn't you? I coldly stated this, staring at my husband, still seated on the sofa. Since we haven't submitted the marriage certificate, we're not legally a couple. Plus, I built this house before we got married. Wait, you can't be serious. Indeed, I am serious. The one who needs to leave is you, Joshua. I can't live with someone as horrible as you. Wait, hold on. You've changed since you retired, Joshua. If it was just the nasty things you did to me, I could still forgive you, but it's unacceptable for you to badmouth my friends and mother. Wait, I was just jealous. You can still work while I can't. And you even said that you can work for another 5 years with re-employment. I was planning to work in the same department even after my retirement. but the company told me to move to an insignificant department. I couldn't swallow my pride. When I refused, they simply cut me off at the age of 65. As he said this, he hung his head and glanced sideways at me. He probably expected me to gently encourage him, as I used to do in such times, but none of that matters now. I went to the kitchen to get a garbage bag, and just as my husband had done with my belongings, I began to throw his things into it, one after another. I delivered the final blow to my husband, who was stunned by the scene. You seem to be relying on my income and savings after your retirement, but since we're not a couple, I want you to leave this house. You'll have to get by on your own from now on. Wait, I apologize for everything, so please don't kick me out. It's too late for regrets now. Goodbye. And so I managed to take my revenge on my husband and became free. After that, my husband lost his place to live, and as he was wasteful with money, his savings are almost zero, so he's living a very poor life. Of course, he can't make a living on pension alone, and given his high pride, even finding reemployment seems hopeless. He's said to be eking out a living with daily part-time jobs. He's been disliked by his relatives for a long time, so there's no one to help him. This is truly reaping what you sow. On the other hand, I started living with my mother. I was worried about my mother's health, and since her home was getting old, I invited her to live in this house. I managed to balance my work and caregiving with the help of understanding from my workplace and using caregiving services. It's very busy, but I'm living fulfilling and enjoyable days every day.